You'd be surprised how quiet betrayal can be. It doesn't always come with slammed doors or angry shouting. Sometimes it enters your life like a shadow at dusk, slow, creeping, and almost beautiful in its subtlety. You don't even notice it until the light's gone and you're sitting there, in the dark. My name's Daniel, and if you met me 2 years ago, you'd probably think I had it all. A stable job, 2 wonderful kids, a wife who made people turn heads when she walked into a room. And not just because of how she looked, but how she was. Graceful, warm, alive. Her name was Claire. We met at a fundraiser my company hosted for a local shelter. She was a volunteer. I was just another overworked logistics manager who barely had time to blink, let alone believe in love at first sight. But then she looked up at me. That slight tilt of the head. The kind of smile that tells you 1,000 things you don't even have the words for yet. 6 months later, we were married. Everyone said we were perfect together. Maybe that was the first warning sign. Perfection doesn't exist. It's just a story we tell ourselves when we're afraid of the truth. For the first few years, everything felt right. Simple breakfasts in the kitchen, spontaneous weekend road trips, late-night talks about nothing and everything. She laughed at my dry humor, and I loved the way she'd hum when she chopped vegetables. Out of tune, always the same melody. We had 2 kids, Samuel and Ellie. They were her mirror, not just in looks but in spirit. Gentle, curious, full of wonder. But love doesn't always disappear in a bang. Sometimes it just fades, unnoticed. And in its place, a quiet distance starts growing. I first noticed it on a Tuesday. I remember because she'd forgotten to pack Sam's lunch, which she never did. She laughed it off, said she'd been distracted with work emails. Fair enough. We were all juggling things. I didn't push it. But that night, she was distant. Not angry, not sad, just elsewhere. It kept happening. Little things, a shift in tone, a glance that didn't linger, a late return home with no real explanation. But I convinced myself it was just the stress of raising a family, keeping up with her career. I didn't want to be the insecure husband. I didn't want to be that guy. So I stayed quiet. But silence has a weight. And every time she brushed off a question or left a room without looking back, that weight grew heavier. Until one day, it wasn't just small things anymore. It was a phone call. At 11:47 p.m., I was up finishing a report. She was in the shower. Her phone buzzed, screen lit up, and for a moment, just a moment, my eyes landed on the name. Greg. No last name, just Greg. No emoji, no context. Just 5 letters that suddenly felt like a scream in my chest. She came out, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping. I didn't say anything, just handed her the phone. She looked at the screen, then at me, a pause, then that smile, almost too calm. It's just Greg from work. He had a deadline question. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but there was something in her voice. Not guilt, not panic. Something colder, like she'd practiced that line. Still, I nodded. Okay. That night, I lay awake beside her. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine was not. I didn't ask questions the next morning. I made breakfast, packed the kids' lunches, kissed her on the cheek like I always did. But something inside me shifted. I stopped ignoring the signs. I started listening to the silence. The days that followed were quiet wars. She became more careful. I became more observant. We danced around each other like 2 people who knew the end was coming, but neither wanted to say the words. I checked her phone once, just once. I hated myself for it, but I did it. It was clean, too clean. Not a single message from Greg. In fact, the whole thread had been deleted, like they'd never spoken, and that was what convinced me. Not what I found, but what I didn't. So, I did what I never thought I would. I contacted an attorney, not to file for divorce. Not yet. I needed to know where the cracks were, how deep they ran, what kind of betrayal I was actually dealing with. I wasn't going to throw away my family over a hunch, but I wasn't going to let myself be made a fool either. The attorney, her name was Miranda, was sharp, professional, asked me the right questions without judgment. I told her everything I knew, everything I suspected. Then she asked something I didn't expect. Daniel, if what you fear turns out to be true, what do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had held Claire's on our wedding day, that had carried our children, built this life we shared. I want the truth, I finally said. Whatever it is, she nodded. Then we'll get it. Carefully, legally, and on your terms. I walked out of that office with a cold clarity. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about respect, self-respect, about reclaiming the part of myself that had been slowly eroded by all the lies Claire wasn't telling me. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just come from one act. It's a slow dismantling of trust, moment by moment, until you wake up one day and realize you're sleeping beside a stranger, and I was done pretending I didn't notice. It's strange how the world doesn't change when yours is falling apart. The mail still gets delivered, the coffee still brews, the kids still argue about cartoons before school. No one pauses to ask if your heart is broken or if your home has become a stranger's theatre stage. After I left Miranda's office, I tried to act normal. Normal was my armor. I still got up at 6, still folded Ellie's blanket before heading downstairs, still packed Claire's lunch, even when I didn't feel like she deserved it. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about holding on to the life I had, until I decided what came next. But Claire, she changed. Just a little. Barely enough for anyone else to notice. But I did. She started texting less around me. Then, oddly, she started texting more, in front of me. Almost as if to prove there was nothing to hide. But no one does that, unless they're hiding something. It was all too casual, like someone rehearsing innocence. And then, one day, she came home with takeout, Indian food, my favorite, lamb vindaloo, garlic naan, even the mango lassi I hadn't had in months. She set it down on the table, smiled like old times. I figured we could have a night in, she said. The kids were with my sister that night. It was just us. She poured wine, laughed at my joke, asked about my day. It felt like a memory, almost too perfect to be real. After dinner, she sat across from me on the couch. No TV, no distractions, just that silence again. But this time, it felt intentional. I've been thinking about us, she began. I didn't respond, just waited. She looked down at her wineglass, tracing the rim with her finger. I know I've been distant. I've let things slip. And I'm sorry. A pause. Just long enough for me to feel my breath tighten. I don't want to lose what we have, she added softly. I love you, Daniel. She didn't cry, didn't reach for me. Just those words, calm, steady, almost too calm. And I said nothing. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. Sadness, suspicion, a deep, aching disappointment. Because if she really was sorry, then why was Greg's name still on my mind? Why did my gut still whisper that she was trying to get ahead of something? I love you too, I finally said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. That night, as she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, was this remorse or strategy? Miranda had put me in touch with a private investigator, a quiet man named Hall, retired cop. Didn't talk much, which I liked. He said he needed a week, maybe 2, just enough time to track movements, confirm patterns. He promised to stay within legal bounds. I told him to be discreet. And while Hall did his work in the background, Claire's change continued. She began calling during the day again. Little things. Did you eat lunch? Don't forget Ellie's recital. Thoughtful things. She started showing up at my office occasionally with coffee. The front desk loved her. You've got to keep her, they'd say, and I'd smile. Because, even then, Even in the middle of doubt and heartbreak, part of me wanted to believe them. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I just listened, watched, learned. Then, a few nights later, she asked if we could take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. Something to reset, she said, before it's too late. Her eyes looked softer than they had in months, and yet something inside me stayed guarded. A wall had gone up, brick by quiet brick, and no amount of warm glances or shared wine could tear it down. Still, I agreed. We booked a cabin in the mountains, small, secluded, just us. And for a moment, I thought maybe, this could be salvaged. But the day before we were supposed to leave, Hall called. "I thought you'd want to see this in person," he said. We met at a diner. He slid a brown envelope across the table. Inside, photos, time-stamped, clear, unmistakable. Claire, smiling, with Greg, at a wine bar, at his condo, entering together, leaving hours later. A kiss, a hand on his chest, not just once, 3 different dates. 3 different nights I'd been home alone, thinking she was catching up on projects. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. I thanked Hall, paid him, and left. Back in my car, I stared at the photos. I didn't feel rage, just something colder. Resolve. Because now, it wasn't suspicion. It was proof. And she was about to go with me to the mountains, like nothing had ever happened. I spent that night packing, smiling, pretending. She kissed me goodnight, told me she was excited to reconnect. I nodded. Me too. But my thoughts were somewhere else entirely. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted understanding. I wanted to know how deep her betrayal went, how long she'd been pretending. I wanted to watch her lie, to see if she'd ever come clean. And I wanted her to know, eventually, that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. But not now. No. That would come later. For now, I'd let her play the part of the loving wife. Because the mountain trip wasn't just a reset. It was the beginning of the end. It's easy to fake happiness in the mountains. The air is cleaner. The silence is deeper. And for a few moments, when the morning sun filters through tall pine trees, you can almost forget what's broken back home. Claire was glowing that first morning at the cabin. She cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, strawberries with powdered sugar, like she used to make when we first got married. She hummed while she worked, that old, familiar, off-key tune. If I hadn't seen the photos, I might have believed the act, might have let myself be swept back into her world, but I had seen them, and I couldn't unsee them. So instead, I smiled, played my part. We took long walks, held hands. She leaned on me during a movie like we were still young, still honest. I even caught her watching me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. And that's when it hit me. I was becoming a stranger to her, not because I'd changed overnight, but because I'd stopped being predictable. I wasn't the man who let things go anymore. I wasn't the quiet fool she thought she could comfort back into ignorance. I'd seen too much. On our second night, we sat by the fire. She poured red wine, pulled a blanket over both our laps. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to speak first. "I've missed this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, staring into the flames. "Me too." She looked at me then, searching. Maybe for a sign that I was still hers, maybe for guilt in her own eyes. She didn't find it. Instead, I asked her, casually, "Do you ever think people grow apart, and then pretend they haven't?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we spend so much time trying to get back to how things were, that we don't stop to ask if that version of us even exists anymore." She was quiet. Then, softly, "We can find our way back." I turned to her and gave a small, practiced smile. "Can we?" And just for a flicker, just a fraction of a second, I saw it. Doubt. worry, a crack in the perfect performance. She leaned into me, placed her hand on my chest. Daniel, whatever it is, whatever we've lost, I want to fix it. I didn't pull away. I didn't challenge her, because it wasn't time, not yet. Instead, I kept watching. She brought up Greg once, in passing. He might call while, "We're up here. He's a bit needy with projects," she said, laughing lightly, like it was a joke. I raised an eyebrow. "Still working this weekend?" "Just a few things," she said quickly. "It's nothing." Of course it was nothing. Just like all the other nothings she had carefully constructed for months. But I let her speak. Let her believe I was leaning in again. That's what she needed me to be. A man willing to forgive, willing to forget, willing to build on a cracked foundation. What she didn't know was that while she was playing wife, I was preparing to be her undoing. When we returned from the trip, I didn't confront her. I didn't show my hand. Instead, I got to work. I started building a life she wasn't part of. Quietly, strategically. I reconnected with an old friend from law school, Jamie. She had opened her own boutique firm, specializing in financial disputes and asset protection. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I explained what I needed, she didn't hesitate. She drew up the paperwork, advised me on accounts, on trusts, on how to protect the kids' future, my future. We moved slowly, carefully. My paycheck was rerouted through a holding LLC. Claire never noticed. I also started seeing a therapist, not because I needed to be fixed, but because I wanted to process this the right way, without venom, without self-destruction, and perhaps most importantly, I started recording. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive, just notes, conversations I remembered, a timeline of lies, little contradictions, the kind of information you store in your back pocket, not to strike with, but to protect yourself if the war escalates. Meanwhile, Claire continued her show. She was sweeter than ever, picked up the kids more often, wore perfume she hadn't touched in a year, called me babe again. To most people, we looked like a couple coming out of a storm, but inside, I was preparing for the flood. One day, she asked if we should renew our vows. "It could be good for us," she said, eyes wide with hope. I nodded. "Let's think about it." She beamed, and part of me ached, not for her, but for the life I thought I had, for the woman I once trusted, for the family portrait that had slowly faded to sepia behind a glass of lies. But I didn't let it show. Because here's the thing about people who betray you. They often think they're smarter than you, that their guilt can be washed away with gestures, that your silence means surrender. What Claire didn't know was that silence can be a strategy too, and mine was almost over. In the evenings, when she slept soundly beside me, I would lie awake and review everything, every text she'd hidden, every excuse she'd given, every time she'd looked me in the eyes and fed me a version of love that wasn't real. She thought she still knew me, but I was changing, becoming a man she'd no longer recognize, not because I wanted revenge, but because I deserved peace, and I was going to take it back, one legal move at a time. People think revenge comes with fire and fury, but sometimes it arrives dressed in calm. A signature on a quiet document, a pause during dinner, a simple phrase said at the right time that changes the shape of everything. The more Claire thought we were healing, the more carefully I worked to dismantle the illusion. It started with the house. She'd always handled the bills. It was her little kingdom. She liked the control, reminded me constantly that her financial management kept us afloat, even when it was mostly my income paying for the roof over our heads. But I had learned a lot in those quiet nights with Jamie, the attorney. Learned how property laws worked in our state, what was considered marital assets, what wasn't. Learned how to restructure ownership under certain conditions, especially when one party was caught in an affair. She didn't know it, but the title of the house was shifting, slowly, legally. The second mortgage she'd quietly co-signed without telling me months ago. I found it, uncovered the entire scheme. She had pulled out funds to help someone, Greg, no doubt. It had his company name all over the wire transfer receipts. That's when the disgust hit me. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd financially tied my future to the man she was sneaking off to see, risked the roof over our children's heads for him, and still. She kissed me every morning, still held my hand in public, still spoke about a fresh start. I didn't explode, didn't accuse. I made a copy of every document, passed them to Jamie. Then I closed the shared credit card accounts and replaced her access with a new one, issued under the new trust I'd built for the kids. When she brought it up, surprised, I told her it was a financial restructure for tax purposes. She nodded, trying to pretend she understood. But I saw it. The flash of unease. She was starting to sense that something was changing, that I wasn't the same husband she'd slowly worn down over the years. Then came the dinner party. It was her idea, a celebration of our renewed commitment, she said. She invited friends, colleagues, even a few of mine she never used to care for. She wore a deep green dress, hair done just right. She looked beautiful. For a moment, I almost believed the version of her I used to love was still in there. She clinked her glass mid-evening and said, "To second chances, to rebuilding, and to this man, who's stronger and more patient than I ever deserved." Everyone clapped, and I smiled, because only I knew what was coming. After everyone left, she wrapped her arms around me in the kitchen. Her voice was soft. "I meant what I said tonight," she whispered. "We're going to be better." I kissed her forehead. "I know." The next morning, I left a legal envelope on her desk before heading to work. Not divorce papers, yet. Just a simple acknowledgement form for a change in how our assets were being managed. Legal jargon. She probably wouldn't even read it. She signed it that night. Didn't even ask what it meant. I scanned it and sent it straight to Jamie. The noose tightened, not from anger, but precision. It was around this time that Greg made a mistake. He came to our house. It was mid-afternoon. I was working from home. Claire had gone out to get groceries. The doorbell rang, and there he was. Tall, tan, expensive haircut, shirt slightly unbuttoned like he thought casual confidence could disguise cowardice. He looked surprised to see me. "Oh," he said. "I didn't know you'd be home." I stared at him. "I live here." He shifted, cleared his throat. "Is Claire around?" "Nope." He stood there, awkward. "Can you let her know I stopped by?" I didn't move. "What name should I give her?" He blinked. "Greg." "Greg," I repeated slowly. "And what would this be in reference to?" He hesitated. "She'll know," he said finally. I nodded once and closed the door. That was it. No threats, no shouting, just a closed door. But it rattled him, because the next day Claire was different, edgy, distracted. She cooked dinner but barely touched her food, said she had a headache. Went to bed early. She didn't mention Greg. I didn't ask, because now she was reacting to me, not the other way around, and it felt powerful, not vengeful, just justified. For the first time in years, I felt in control, not of her, but of my own dignity, my own direction. Still, I wasn't finished, not until she faced the truth, not until I saw her see it. So I planned something. A dinner. Just the two of us. I made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first anniversary. She was surprised, touched. I told her it was a special night, and it would be, but not for the reasons she thought. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to tell her everything I knew, but not in anger, in clarity. Because while she thought I was rebuilding our life, I was really preparing to end it, on my terms. The night I chose to tell her was a Thursday. It was cold, unusually so for the time of year. A gentle wind tugged at the coat she wore, her favorite one, The soft navy trench I gave her last Christmas. She smiled when she saw the restaurant, took my hand like she used to. You remembered, she whispered. Of course I did. It was the same place we had celebrated our first anniversary. Back then, everything had felt new, unwritten. I'd watched her eyes sparkle over candlelight. That night, I believed I'd found the one person who'd never hurt me. Now, years later, we sat at the same table, across the same white linen, under the same soft glow, and everything had changed. But she didn't know that yet. She ordered the salmon. I got steak. We talked about the kids, the upcoming school break. She even made a joke about learning to ski. I let her talk. I let her laugh, because people always reveal their truest selves when they think the danger has passed. And Claire, she thought she was safe again. But safety is a privilege you earn through truth, not manipulation. When the waiter cleared the plates, I placed a small leather folder on the table. Quiet, unassuming, almost like a check. Claire tilted her head. What's this? I watched her reach for it with fingers too relaxed. She opened it slowly. Inside were 3 photos. Greg, her, arms around him, laughing, entering a condo together. One of the images caught their kiss, just as it landed. Her hand froze. She stared, didn't speak. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. When she finally looked at me, her eyes weren't shocked. They were scared. I didn't raise my voice. Tell me, I said softly. How long? Her fingers trembled on the folder. She closed it, but didn't push it away. She swallowed. It's not what it looks like. I almost smiled. Then tell me what it is. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her eyes welled with tears. And for a second, I saw the woman I used to know, or maybe just the actress she'd perfected over time. Daniel, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said. Over and over. Silence. She looked down at her lap, then back at me. Is this why you've been distant? Why you changed everything? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned forward. You think this is about distance, Claire. This is about respect. You didn't just lie. You stole from our future. You risked our children's home. You funneled money into someone else's business while pretending to love me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't mean to. But you did. I said it flatly. No heat, just truth. You didn't just cheat on me, Claire. You gambled. With everything we built. Her voice was a whisper now, barely audible. I was lost. No, I said calmly. You were selfish. She stared at me like she was seeing someone else for the first time. And maybe she was, because I wasn't the man who begged. I wasn't the man who wondered what he did wrong. That version of me died the night I saw Greg's hand on your back. She reached across the table. I didn't move. Please don't throw this away. I'm not, I replied. You did. A long pause passed between us. She looked down again, as if the linen tablecloth might offer a way out. Finally, she spoke. What happens now? I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first, laid it gently on the table. Now, I said. Now we begin the next chapter. She stared at it but didn't touch it. What is that? Asset separation, custody framework, pre-divorce mediation prep. Her face went pale. I continued, gently. You'll have legal counsel, of course. I've made sure everything is clean. Fair. I'm not out to ruin you, Claire, but I will not let you drag me down, with you, and I will not let Greg benefit from a life he didn't help build. Her lips quivered. She shook her head slightly, as if denial could turn back time. Daniel, we have children. Yes, I said. And they deserve to grow up in a house where love isn't counterfeit. She opened the folder with trembling hands, read the first page. She didn't speak for a long while. I could see the wheels turning. For once, she was speechless. "I'll fight this," she finally said, but the words were brittle. "You can," I replied, "but you won't win." She looked up. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said, rising to my feet. "It's a promise backed by preparation." I left her there at the table, alone with the documents, the photos, and the truth she'd spent months trying to outrun. That night, as I lay in bed, she came home late. The door clicked quietly. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway, unsure. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The silence between us had changed shape. It was no longer the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a decision made. And she finally knew. I wasn't bluffing. Some people think pain is loud, but the most devastating kind. It's silent, like when your name is called in a courtroom and you realize you're not just on trial, you've already been judged. Or when someone you thought you controlled looks at you like a stranger, and suddenly you're the one afraid. Claire didn't speak to me for 2 days after the dinner. She didn't slam doors, didn't cry, just floated through the house like a ghost, unsure which walls still belonged to her. Even the kids noticed. "Mum's acting weird," Sam said, frowning. I didn't respond. I just tightened the strap on his backpack and kissed his forehead. Claire knew something was coming. She just didn't know how deep the blade had been hidden. Because I'd waited long enough for every piece to be in place, and now it was time to pull the thread. The first tremor hit her inbox at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, a formal notice of intent to file a forensic audit of all shared accounts. Claire was still listed on 2 of my business partnerships, both of which were clean. But what she didn't know was that one of them had recently restructured into an LLC tied to a compliance trust. Any irregular activity traced back through our marital holdings, like the transfer she'd made to Greg's startup, would now be under scrutiny. By 11 a.m., she called me. "Daniel," she said, trying to sound calm. "What the hell is this email?" "I told you," I said gently. "The separation's begun. Everything will be handled legally." "You're auditing me?" "No, we're auditing our assets. But if your name's attached to transactions that shouldn't exist, that's not on me." Silence. Then, "You're trying to ruin me?" "No," I said, still soft. "I'm just done protecting you." That afternoon, she went to Greg. I know because Hall, the PI, sent me photos again. Not for proof, but for records. She looked frantic, cornered. He looked annoyed, distant. According to Hall's report, Greg hadn't known about the audit, had no idea she'd used joint equity as seed money. His business was in trouble. She had bailed him out quietly, and now the exposure could put them both in financial risk. That night, she came home late again. Her keys shook in the lock. I was waiting at the kitchen table, lights low, a single folder in front of me. She walked in and stared at it like it might bite her. "What now?" she asked. Her voice was hollow, exhausted. I gestured to the chair. She sat. "This is the financial summary of what's going to happen next," I said. "You'll get an equal share of the remaining liquid assets. But everything you redirected without consent, those are being reclaimed through the trust. Greg will be receiving a letter of notice as well." She didn't respond. "You committed marital fraud, Claire. That's not just emotional, it's criminal. But I'm not pressing charges. Yet, if you cooperate." Her eyes glistened, but I saw no remorse, only fear. "Daniel," she said finally, her voice cracking. "I was stupid. I got caught up in something. It felt exciting. I felt like I was seen again." I nodded slowly, and I felt like I was disposable. She winced. "I never meant—" "Stop," I said gently, but firmly. "You meant it every day you came home and lied to my face. Every time you kissed our children goodnight after climbing out of another man's bed. You meant it when you chose him over the life we built." The tears came then. but they no longer moved me. "Please," she whispered, "don't take the house. Don't do this in front of the kids." I leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice calm as ever. "I've already spoken with the mediator. The kids will stay with me primarily. You'll get weekends. Holidays are negotiable." She shook her head. "You can't. Daniel, I'm their mother." "Yes," I said, standing. And that used to mean something. I left her there again, alone with the weight of her choices. No shouting, no chaos. Just a slow, surgical undoing of everything she tried to steal. The next week, she moved into a short-term rental. Greg didn't help. He'd already started ghosting her once he realized legal trouble might follow. The irony was brutal. She gave up everything for a man who wouldn't even return her calls when things got hard. One evening, weeks later, she showed up at my door. The kids were asleep. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. She looked thinner, worn down. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I want you to know I'm sorry." I nodded once. "Okay, I ruined everything." "No," I corrected her. "You just revealed what it really was." She looked like she wanted to say something more, but didn't. And for the first time, she left. No scene. No more pleas. Just silence. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just afraid of losing me. She was afraid because she'd finally seen what I'd become. Not angry, not broken, but untouchable. It's strange what peace really feels like. Not the peace you imagine in daydreams, some perfect sunrise, a life tied up neatly with ribbons. No. Real peace is quieter, simpler. It's waking up and not feeling your chest tighten. It's walking through your own home and knowing you're not stepping over lies. The house was still the same. Same creaky stair on the landing. Same chipped corner on the kitchen island where Ellie used to bang her toy trucks. But it felt different now. It was mine again. After Claire moved out, the silence wasn't lonely. It was clean. And the kids, well, kids are resilient in ways we forget. Sam asked where Mommy went. I told him she was living somewhere else now, but that she still loved them. He nodded and went back to his Legos. Ellie just wanted to know who would braid her hair in the morning. I learned. Life didn't snap back into place, but it realigned. I spent more time with the kids, real time. Not distracted, not buried in guilt or suspicion. We cooked, we painted the garage, we watched old superhero movies until we fell asleep on the couch. And in the quiet hours after bedtime, I allowed myself to sit with the wreckage, not to mourn it, but to understand it. That's how you heal, I think. Not by pretending something didn't break, but by tracing the cracks until you finally stop, blaming yourself for where they started. Claire's spiral came quickly after that. I didn't follow every detail, didn't want to, but people talk. Greg severed ties, made some kind of PR statement about being misled by a personal acquaintance. His business went under. The money Claire lent him vanished with it. She tried to recover, picked up contract work, started staying with a cousin. Some friends stopped answering her calls. Others offered shallow comfort. She kept her head down, but the damage followed. Her like smoke on old clothes. One evening, weeks after everything had been finalized, she came to see the kids. It was a scheduled visit. Court approved. But she was early, nervous, wearing the same coat I gave her, though it looked heavier on her now. She didn't come inside. I stepped out to meet her on the porch. She stood there, hesitating, before finally asking, "Do they hate me?" I shook my head. "They're children. They just miss honesty." She looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't. There was no more drama left in her. Just wait. Just silence. "I still love them," she said. "I know," I replied. "And they'll always love you. But they're watching now, Claire. Every word you say, every step you take." She nodded slowly. "They'll need time," I added. "So will I." "I understand." She turned to go, then paused. "I thought you'd destroy me," she said quietly. "After everything." I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't need to, I said. You did it to yourself. She flinched, but didn't argue. That's when I knew she truly understood. Not just the consequences, but the loss. She hadn't just lost a marriage. She'd lost the man who used to believe in her, protect her, love her beyond reason. And there was no getting him back. The months that followed weren't easy. Healing never is. But they were honest. And that honesty became my compass. The final court ruling favoured my full custodial request. Claire had visitation supervised for now. The judge cited financial recklessness and moral inconsistency, words that sound cold on paper, but in truth, they were mercy. I didn't take her for everything. I didn't empty her accounts or humiliate her publicly. But I ensured the kids were safe, my assets were secured, and my dignity was intact. I even wrote her a letter once, not to rekindle, not to punish, just a page of truth. I told her I hoped she would find herself, that maybe, one day, the version of her who used to hum in the kitchen, the one who cried at movies and danced barefoot, in our hallway, that woman might return. Not for me, but for her own sake. She never replied, but I didn't need her to, because closure doesn't come in big speeches or dramatic farewells. It comes when you finally stop needing answers from someone who never deserved your questions in the first place. Now, on Sundays, I take the kids to the lake. We pack sandwiches, skip stones, build forts from twigs. They laugh like nothing was ever broken. And maybe for them, that's true. Sometimes people ask if I'll date again. If I'm ready, I don't know. I'm not rushing towards something new just to outrun what happened. Some wounds deserve their time. Some silences still teach me things. But I do know this. When you've been betrayed by someone you trusted with your soul, it's easy to lose yourself in the fire. But if you're patient, if you stay quiet, steady, and prepared, you don't have to set anything ablaze. You just step aside and let the truth burn through on its own. And when the smoke clears, you're still standing. And that is enough.